Good morning, guys. In the last session, we discussed about Spring Security, how to work with HTTP basic authentication by using Spring Security, and how to override the default security credentials by using properties file. Then we discussed about how to secure specific URL patterns by customizing security framework in the Spring Boot. Spring Security is a highly customizable framework for authentication and authorization in our application. Here, whenever we add the security starter, by default, all the URL patterns will be secured in our application with the basic authentication. If you don't want to secure all the URL patterns, then we need to create one security configuration class. Here, to represent this Java class as a configuration class, we are using @configuration annotation. And in order to represent this configuration related to security in our application, we are going to use one annotation called enable web security annotation. Then next one, here we are going to customize security filter chain. So when we add Spring Security dependency in the project, by default this security filter chain bean will be executed. That bean will take care of all the URL patterns by default. But in the project, some methods does not need any security. Everybody should be able to access login page in our application, contact us page in our application, about us page in our application. In order to customize that, we are going to create this filter bean, security filter chain bean, and we are going to specify which request it should allow, for which request authentication is required. So for these two URLs, I don't want any authentication. Everybody should be able to access them. So we are configuring this security filter chain for that. And the next one, if you go for the properties file, you can configure only one user credentials here. But for our application, multiple users will be available. In order to configure multiple users, we are going to create in-memory user details manager. So what is the purpose of this in-memory user details manager? By using this, we can configure multiple users who can access our application. This is also just for development purpose, but not for the production, right? So in order to work for the production, we need to use JDBC authentication or JWT tokens. Now, so how to implement JDBC authentication for the Spring Security? JDBC authentication in the sense, in the database table, our user records will be available. When user trying to access our application, the authentication should happen with the credentials available in the database. So for that, we have taken the example also how to work with JDBC authentication. In order to work with the JDBC authentication, first we need to set up the tables for storing the user's data. One table is users table, another table is authorities table. In the user table, we are going to store the username and password. In the authorities table, for the username, we are going to configure the roles also. So first let me set up these users in the database. Let me take the database. I'm using MySQL now. In this MySQL database, I will create one table with a name called users, and I will create another table with a name called authorities. Authorities nothing but roles, guys. Now, so let us use the database, use SBMS 36. So in this database, show the tables. So there are multiple tables available. Now, we are going to create a new table. So this is the query which is used to create the new table in the database. This is a new table which is used to create new table. The table name I'm taking as users, guys. So the table name taking as users, create this table. Then I'm going to create one more table with a name called authorities. Perfect. Now, two tables got created. Let's verify the tables created now. Users table is available, authorities table is available. Now we need to insert the records into our table. So here username is available, password is available, enabled, whether that user is a active user or inactive user. So here I'm keeping 1, that means a active user, 0 means inactive user. Now, so this is the query to insert the record, but here password is available. I'm not storing the password directly. I want to store the password by using encryption technique. How do we encrypt the password? By using bcrypt algorithm. So go to the browser, let's use this URL to open bcrypt generator. So one user I'm taking as a John. So let me take the password also as a John only. User, you can use any username and password here. I'm using the password as John, encrypt. Then I'm getting this text, guys. Okay, I'm updating this password here. Then next, we are having one more user. We are having one more user called Smith. Let us generate password for the Smith also. So use the password encrypt. So this is the Smith encrypted password using bcrypt algorithm. Remove this old password and update this password. Perfect. So with this, 2 user records available. Take these 2 user records and insert them. So execute these insert queries now. Insert users and insert users. So let us see the data in the tables. Select star from users. Currently, I am inserting the users manually. So later point of time, we will develop one login and registration application by using Spring Security. So select star from users. 2 user records inserted, user John, user Smith. Password is also John and Smith only. Then for these 2 users, let us insert some roles also. For the John, I am giving 2 roles. For the Smith, I am giving only 1 role. So insert 3 records into the database table now. Remove these 2 insert queries. Now I am using for John 2 roles, for Smith 1 role. Let us select the data from this table. Select a star from authorities. You can use the name as roles also, no problem. Any name you can give for the table. For the first table, I'm giving the name as users. For the second table, I'm giving the name as authorities. So with this, users table is having 2 records. Authorities table is having 3 records. So we are clear with our database setup. Then we need to create our boot application with the below dependencies. So what are the dependencies we are using? Web starter dependency, security starter. As we are using JDBC authentication for our application, we are using data JDBC starter, MySQL connector. As we are connecting with the MySQL database, we need a MySQL driver for that. Then DevTools and Lombok also we can use. Now, let me create the new project, file, new, Spring Starter project, security with JDBC authentication. Cool. Click on next, dependencies, web starter, security starter, then data JDBC we need to use. Earlier we used Spring Data JPA. Now we are using Spring JDBC, right? Along with this one, we are going to use MySQL driver. So if required, we can add DevTools dependency also, right? If Lombok is installed in the IDE, then you can configure Lombok as well. DevTools dependency used to reload our server when there is a code change. Data JDBC to communicate with the database. MySQL driver to load the driver into our application. Security to perform authentication and authorization. Web starter to create a REST controller. Click on next and click on finish. Then once this project is created, let us configure security JDBC. 52 I need to give. Go to pom.xml, check the dependency here. data, JDBC, starter security, web starter, dev tools, MySQL driver is available. Fine. Let us go to our properties file. Change the properties file to YML. Updating the properties file to YML file, then configure our data source information. So this is our data source information. We are connecting with MySQL database. So this is why our username and password. I'm not sure with the username and password. Let me check here. In this properties file, username is root, password is ashokid@123. Username is root and password is this one. And this is the JDBC URL. SBMS 36 is our database name in the MySQL. Whatever the queries are executing, I want to print those queries on the console. Perfect. So with this, project creation is done. First of all, database setup is done. This is step 1. Set up the database, creating the tables and inserting the records. Then step 2, creating the project. Then step 3, configuring the data source properties. The next one, create one REST controller with the methods. So here I'm taking 3 methods in the REST controller. No need to explain. So all these 3 methods are mapped to get request. One method URL is /admin. Another method URL is /user. One method does not have any URL pattern, that is default URL pattern. Why I am giving the name as admin and user? This means this URL can be accessed by only user having admin role based access. This method can be accessed by the user who is having only normal user role. And this can be accessed by anyone. Both admin and user can access. For this method, we don't want any security. Anybody can access. But for these 2 methods, security is required. Authentication is required. Authorization is also required. So create one REST controller here. New class dot REST demo REST controller. Demo REST controller is available. In this REST controller, I'm keeping these 3 methods, guys. One is admin method, another one is user method, and another one is normal method. To represent this as a REST controller, we are using @REST controller annotation. Go to demo REST controller. So specify web starter is available, right? Then by dependencies are not coming. Okay, here it should be build automatically. Now we are getting REST controller, Control-Shift-O. All the dependencies and import statements are added. So when you are doing the development, make sure in the menu project option, this option is selected. Then auto compilation will happen in the IDE. If you uncheck this checkbox, auto compilation will not happen. So build automatically. Perfect. So REST controller is also available. Now, if I run this application directly like this, by default, all the methods will be secured. Let me change the port number also. Server.port. Server.port is available. Let me configure as 8081. So let's do maven update. Maven update the project, force update. Good. So let's run this. Run as boot application. Run as boot application. So what happened now? Username is user, password is generated on the console. So if you go and access any method in this URL, localhost colon 8081, default URL pattern is also available. That also secured by default with the Spring Security. So if you want to access, you need to enter your username and password, then only it can be accessed. But I don't want to use the default credentials of the Spring Security. I want to override the credentials. What are the options available to override the credentials? First option, by using this YML file or properties file, we can override the credential. That is one thing. What is the second option to override the credentials? By configuring in-memory users. So by using in-memory authentication, as we have done in the last session, we can create one configuration class. In that configuration class, you can configure one bean like this. If you configure one bean like this, what will happen? It will verify credentials are available in the in-memory bean or not for the authentication. So I don't want to go with the in-memory authentication. I want to go with the JDBC authentication. JDBC authentication in the sense, my application should verify. Here, I will provide my credentials, username and password. This application should communicate with the MySQL database to verify credentials are matching with the table data or not. Whatever the username and password I am giving here, that data is matching with the database credentials or not, it has to verify. So that means we need to tell to the Spring Security to perform JDBC authentication for our application. How can we tell that? To perform the JDBC authentication, we need to create security configuration. Here we are going to specify the data authentication manager. So authentication manager, we need to inform to the authentication manager, you use JDBC authentication by using the given data source object. So your password is already encrypted in the database. Password is not available directly in the database. Password is encrypted in the database. End user will provide encrypted password. End user will provide the normal password. End user will provide the normal password. Then how my application should compare user given password is matching with the database password or not? In the database, how is the password stored? In the database, the password is stored in the encrypted manner. But end user will enter encrypted password or end user will enter the normal password? End user will enter the normal password. So here, the moment when you provide username password, when you click on the sign in button, it should verify that user given password is matching with the database password or not. To verify user given password matching with the database password or not, for that application should encrypt user given password also. Suppose I am giving my password as John, username as John, my password something. But in the database, password is available in the normal form or password is available in the encrypted form? Password is available in the encrypted form. So what our security configuration should do now? It should encrypt this password also and compare with the password available in the database or not. Are you getting my point? It should encrypt the password given by the user and verify it is matching with the database password or not. I mean the password available in the database table or not. How we have encrypted our password? Before storing in the database, how we encrypted our password? What is the algorithm we used? Bcrypt algorithm we have used. So in the configuration also, we need to tell that you need to encrypt the password by using Bcrypt algorithm. Then verify the credentials, retrieve the record from the table with the given username. So here we are giving the username. So you try to retrieve the record based on the username. Then you compare user given password is matching with the password available in the user record or not. So before comparing, this given password also should be encrypted, then only it can compare. So here in our JDBC authentication, we are executing two queries, guys. One query is used to retrieve the record from the user table. Another query is to retrieve the role for the user record. Because we are performing not just authentication, we are performing authentication plus authorization also. Are you guys able to understand? Now, so what is this authentication manager is going to do in our application now? This authentication manager will verify login credentials are valid or not. Where the actual data is available in the database table. End user is giving the data in the login page. This login page credentials are matching with database user record credentials or not. For that, it has to encrypt the user password and it has to compare. So what is the process will happen is, what is the process it is going to do? First, it is going to take login form data. What the Spring Security will do is take login form data, retrieve record from DB based on username. Retrieve record from the database. It is retrieving the record based on the username only, guys, not with the password. In the query, we are not using the password. In the query, we are using only username. Then take login form data, encrypt user given password using password encoder. What is the password encoder we configured in the configuration? Bcrypt encoder we have configured in the configuration. Observe the flow. So application will take the login form data. It will encrypt the user given password using password encoder with the help of bcrypt encoder class we are configuring. Retrieve the user record from the DB. Based on given username. Here we are giving username and password. Take the login form data, which is username and password. Encrypt user given password using the password encoder with the help of a bcrypt algorithm. Then retrieve user record from the database based on the given username. Suppose if the record is available, then compare encrypted password with a user password. Whatever the password it is we have given, it will encrypt our password. Then it will compare user given password encrypted data is matching with the password already available in the user record. Okay. So if it is matching, then what is the meaning of that? Authentication is successful. If it is matching, then authentication is successful. Okay. Along with this, it is doing one more operation also. Retrieve user authorities from authorities table based on given username. Next one, verify user having permission to access URL or not. Verify user having permission to access the URL or not. So when you click on login button, when you access particular URL, Spring Security is executing below logic. This logic will be executed by Spring Security internally. So here I am trying to access my URL pattern. So 8081/admin. I'm trying to access admin. When I access admin, what is happening now? It is authenticating, right? By default, all the URLs are authenticated. So what kind of authentication we want to perform? JDBC authentication. What is the meaning of JDBC authentication? User credentials are available in the database. Now, how it will perform the authentication? First, we need to log in with the username and password. With the moment, do we have the logic to verify login is valid or not? Are we going to write the logic for that? Who will take care of that authentication and authorization? Spring Security will take care of authentication and authorization. So when you submit the login, it will take the login form data. Given username and password it is going to take. Then it will encrypt user given password using password encoder by using bcrypt algorithm. Then it will retrieve the user record from the DB based on the given username. If record is available in the table, then it will compare both passwords are matching or not. User given password encrypted, in the database already user record having a password. It is going to compare the passwords are matching or not. If passwords are matching, nothing but authentication is successful. Then it will go for the authorization. How it will perform the authorization? It is going to retrieve user authorities from the authorities table based on the authorities from DB based on the given username. It will retrieve authorities from the DB based on the given username. If a user having the permission to access that URL, it will allow that. If user don't have the permission for that URL, it will not allow that. So authentication plus authorization will happen in the Spring Security. Are you guys clear? Please read the points once. Take login form data, then encrypt given password using password encoder. Retrieve user record from the DB based on the given username. If record is available, then compare encrypted password with the user password. Retrieve user authorities from the DB table based on the given username. Verify user is having permission to access the given URL or not. This is the logic. So for this, we need to create our configuration class. In the configuration class, mainly there are two methods available. One is authentication manager method. Another one is security filter chain method. First of all, what is this authentication manager method? We are telling to perform JDBC authentication with the given data source object, password encoder, query to retrieve the user record, query to retrieve the authorities of the user. So first let us inject this data source object. Let me create our security configuration class, new class security config using .config package. Let us declare this as a configuration class by using @configuration, and we are using enable web security. So let me stop the server. Yeah. So here I'm declaring two variables, guys. These are basically roles of the admin role and user role is available. Data source object. That means here already we configure our data source properties. So Spring will retrieve this data from the data source available in the YML and will create our data source object. In order to communicate with the database, we need the data source object. Data source object will represent database properties. Data source object will represent database properties. Then we are going to customize authentication manager. So to customize the authentication manager, this is the bean. We are auto wiring. So what is the meaning of auto wiring? We are injecting one bean object into another bean. So here which bean object we are injecting? Authentication manager builder. I want to customize this authentication manager builder and I want to inject into our security configuration. So if you don't write it, still authentication manager builder will work. How it is going to work, guys? It will take care of authentication with the default credentials. Now I want to tell to that authentication manager. Authentication manager nothing but that is responsible to perform authentication in our application. If you don't customize that authentication manager, it will perform authentication using HTTP basic authentication. Basic username, basic password, it is going to verify. I want to tell to that authentication manager, boss, don't use the basic authentication. You go for my JDBC authentication. My table is having the data. So you verify user given data matching with the database record data or not. Right. For that, we are doing this configuration. So authentication manager builder object we are taking. For that, we are configuring .jdbc authentication. To perform the JDBC authentication, it should communicate with the database. For that, we are configuring data source object. Password is not normal in the database. So I'm telling to use bcrypt password encoder to encrypt our password given in the login page and use users by username. You retrieve the user record based on the given username and you retrieve the user role based on the given username. So first query to retrieve the user record from the users table. Second query is used to retrieve the user role from the authorities table. You can't change these queries, guys. You cannot change these queries, right? So here we are customizing authentication manager. Okay. Now I want to configure security authorization also. For which URLs we need security? For which URLs you don't want security, you can customize by using security filter chain. So in the earlier security filter chain we configured only for the allowing the request for the particular URLs. But now here request matchers. Yeah. So here I want to allow slash permit all. What is the meaning of slash permit all? What is the meaning of slash permit all? Slash permit all nothing but anyone can access. What about this slash admin? Only the user having the admin role can access. What about the slash user? Has any role? Admin user can access, normal user also can access. So in the last session, I have not configured this one. I have not configured this one. So in the yesterday's example, we have configured only authentication. In today's example, authentication plus authorization is also available. Now check this one. So here, security filter chain I am customizing, authorize the request. If request is matching with slash admin, if he is having admin role, then only allow the user to access that. Here, if a user is accessing slash user URL, if he is having admin role or user role, allow him. If the URL is a slash, permit all. Anybody can access slash URL. Any other request should be authenticated with the form login. So with this, we are able to configure our JDBC authentication. Two things we have done. One is we are customizing authentication manager with the JDBC queries. Another one is security filter chain also we have updated. Perfect. Let's try to run this application. Refresh. Refresh. Run as. First do the Maven update. Do the Maven. Update the project. Do the force update. Okay. Force update is completed. Right click. Run as boot application. Security config could not be registered. Oh, security config. There is a predefined class with that name. That's why it is not accepting. So let me give the different name for that. So app security config is the name I am giving. When I give the name as just to security config, it is conflicting. So in the Spring Security, there is already a class with a name called security config. So it is asking me to rename my class. So that's why I have renamed it as app security config. Now refresh. Run as boot application. Now this application is started. Still security password is generated. Why? It should not, right? Data security configuration, REST, demo REST controller, app security config. Run as boot application. Yes, I'm getting a issue. 1 minute. Yes, in the latest version, boot 3.x, this bean is not working. Authentication manager builder. They are in the JDBC authentication also, they are hard coding the user details here. Then how it will retrieve from the database? Hmm? No, no, that is not so. First of all, it is not considering the bean. Username, password, the roles, user details, JDBC user details manager by passing the database, data source object, JDBC user details manager. Sir, in the notes, the example that I have given that was related to boot to 2.x version. So in the 3.x, it is not working. Let's try this. Get users by username query. This is also 2.x example. Guys, let's try with the old version of the Spring Boot once. Version 3.15. Here we used 3.2.2. Refresh. Maven update. Run as boot application. It's working, right? It is working, but the doubt is why this password is printing on the console. Yeah, let's run this application once again. Let me close the browser, refresh, do the Maven update. Maven update the project, run as boot application. Here you see that default password is printing. Actually, it should not be printed. Clear the console. Now go to Postman or browser, anything we can test. Let's go for Postman. Get URL. Guys, currently I'm accessing 8081 without any URL pattern. As per our configuration, if I don't give any URL just with the slash, what is the security available for the just slash, guys? Permit all. So we should be able to access that URL. Anyone should be able to access that URL with 8081. So that is available for public access. I have not applied any security for that. Then if I want to access a method which is available with the URL pattern as a slash user, it is asking me to go with the login. Suppose if I go and access another URL with admin, that is also asking me to login. For there are three methods available in our REST controller. One is empty URL pattern, another one is user URL pattern, another one is admin URL pattern. So total there are three URL patterns available in our REST controller. Out of these three URLs, I applied security for only two URLs, admin URL, user URL. For this default URL, no security. So that's why we are able to access that URL pattern. Now, when I try to access slash admin directly, see here, when I try to access slash admin directly, what it is saying, guys? Please sign in. Please sign in. You can't access this URL. It is showing me the login information because that is secured. So admin URL which is secured, I'm going to configure basic authentication, basic auth with username and password. Suppose let's try with Smith and Smith. Try with Smith and Smith. What is the role of the Smith here? User. Can he access admin or he should not access admin? Should not access admin. Click on send now. When we are accessing this one, it is saying please sign in, username and password. Now click on send. Authentication header. Authorization is available. Basic authentication. So go to authorization. Username is Smith and password is also Smith is available. So no auth. If I send it, it is saying this one. If I go with basic auth, Smith and Smith, if I send, I'm able to access. It is showing please sign in. Go to browser. Let me access slash admin URL. Try to access with the Smith credentials and sign in. When Smith is accessing this URL, what it is saying? Smith is having the access for the admin URL. Smith does not have the access for the admin URL. So security is working. But one doubt I have, I need to do more research on this, guys. When we are customizing this security configuration, why the default password is printing on the console, that is the doubt. Normal configuration is working. So when Smith is trying to access our application with admin URL, Smith is authenticated successfully, but Smith is having authorization for that URL, or Smith is not authorized for that URL, not authorized for that URL. But suppose if Smith access user, he is able to access the user URL. Already Smith logged in into our application. He is able to access the user URL. Why he is not able to access admin URL? He don't have a permission for the admin URL. Let's test it once again. Let me stop this one. Let's stop this. refresh, run this project again, run as boot application. Clear the console. Password is generated, random password is printed on the console. It should not be printed. That is the question. Okay, clear the console, go to the browser. So there are three URLs available. Let me access the first URL, localhost colon 8081, which is a default. Anybody can access. Yes, it is working. Then let us access admin URL slash admin. Am I able to access directly? No. Let me access user URL. Am I able to access directly? No. Both URLs are secure. Now, here, when I access slash admin, it is going for the sign in page. I will sign in with the user called Smith, guys. So, what is the role of the Smith? User. Can he access admin URL? No. So, if he try to access admin URL, first it is asking for the authentication. Authentication is a success. But what about authorization? Authorization is failed with the 403 status code. Suppose if this person is accessing slash user, already authentication completed, he can access user URL, but he is not able to access admin URL. Why he is not able to access admin URL? He don't have permission for that. Smith don't have the permission to access admin URL. Now, so let me close it. Let me run my application again. So this time, let's go with the John user. What is the role of the John user? What is the role of the John? Admin. So what he can do? He can access everything in the application. Now let's log in with the John credentials now. Localhost colon 8081 slash available. Public access available for the slash. Now let's go for slash admin. Login page it is asking. Let me log in with the John credentials. Let me log in with the John credentials. Click on sign in. So John is able to access admin method. Yes, John is able to access admin method. Can John access user method also? Yes, John is able to access user method. John is able to access admin method also. So from where it is verifying the credentials, guys? From where it is verifying the credentials? The credentials it is verifying with the database. But this password should not be printed because we have updated the configuration to use only JDBC authentication. But the default password is also printing on the console. So let us see, with the default password, can we access any method here? Run as boot application. Close the browser. Close the browser. Yes. The application started. Default password is available. Go to the browser. Let's try to access now. Localhost colon 8081. Public access available. Then go for slash user only. Slash user. Let's try to give the default username, that is user password. Where is the default password? Available on the console. Give the default password. Click on sign in. Is it working or not working? Yes, the configuration is. So then when we configure JDBC authentication, functionality is working as expected. Functionality is working as expected. Why they are printing this default password? That is the confusion. Whatever the default password they have printed, with this default password, are we able to access the application or we are not able to access the application? We are not able to access the application. Now, which users can access this application now? Only Jan user can access this application. Normal user can access this application. John can access both URLs once he log in, but Smith can access only slash user URL once he log in. Functionality is working as expected. When the default password is not working, why they are printing here? They should not print that password here because we have customized that security by using our JDBC authentication. Good. Sometimes I got confused. Yeah. So guys, you understand what the JDBC authentication doing in the background? Could you please read the steps? In my application, we are using JDBC authentication. What is the meaning of JDBC authentication? What is the meaning of JDBC authentication? Come on, guys. User data is already available in the database table. Spring Security should perform the authentication by retrieving the data from the database table. How Spring Security will retrieve the data from the database? By customizing this authentication manager. This is the logic to perform JDBC authentication. What we are telling in this JDBC authentication? What is the data source object? What is the password encoder? What is the query to retrieve the user record? What is the query to retrieve the user roles? Now, so once I start this project, I'm running this project once again. Close the browser because already we logged in there. Then run this application, run as boot application. When I run this boot application, one default password is printed on the console. Any use of that password? Is there any use of that password? There is no use of that password. Can I log in with this password now? I cannot log in. Clear that. We already tested. That is not working. Now go to browser. So in my application, I am having 3 URL patterns, guys. One is slash, no security. No security. There is a user. Okay, hook authentication plus authorization. Who can access this user? Admin and user can access this URL. And I'm having another URL admin. For this also authentication is available plus authorization is also available. Who can access this one? Only admin. Okay. In our requirement, in our data, what is the role of the John? John is admin. What is the role of Smith? User. So Smith can access which URL? Slash user URL. John can access which URL? He can access, that means if you log in as a John, you can access both URLs. If you log in as a Smith, you can access only one URL. Is that functionality working or not? We are testing. So let us see. Localhost colon 8081. 8081. Localhost colon 8081. Public no security, we are able to access. Now let us go for admin URL or let us go for user URL. I'm going as a user URL, asking for login, authentication. Let us give the data as Smith data. Click on sign in. Smith logged in successfully. Smith able to access slash user. Suppose if Smith is accessing slash admin, is it allowing or not allowing? Not allowing. Why it is not allowing? He is not authorized to access admin method. Smith is a normal user. He is not authorized to access admin method. For example, if I log in as John now, let me go to another browser, localhost colon 8081 slash admin. In another browser, it is asking, let me log in as John and John, click on sign in. Is able to log in as an admin. I mean, John is logged in, admin is able to access. Can he access normal user method also? Yes. John is able to access both methods. Smith is able to access only one method. For another method, the authentication is not required. Slash, only slash, no authentication. Anybody can access this URL. Anybody can access this URL. We logged in as a John. John can access user method. John can access admin method also. In the Edge browser, I logged in as a John user, so we are able to access everything. In the Chrome browser, I logged in as a Smith, localhost colon 8081 slash user. Okay, now logged in as a Smith. Now sign in. Smith logged in as a user. Smith is trying to access admin, not working. So authentication and authorization is working as expected. Okay, good. So in the previous version of the Spring Boot, that when we customize this authentication by using the JDBC authentication concept, default password will not be printed on the console. Now default password also printed on the console. That's why I got confused why that default password is printing. So even though default password is printed, are we able to access the application with that password? It's not working. So there is no use of that default password once we have customized this authentication and authorization concept. So we are able to implement authorization and authentication with the help of our JDBC authentication concept. So here JDBC authentication is available. Here authorization is available based on the roles also. Good. Fine. Now, so we completed basic authentication, we completed in-memory authentication, and we completed JDBC authentication also. The next one, we are going to learn about OAuth concept. In the tomorrow session, we are going to learn a security technique by using OAuth 2.0. So this is another security technique to secure our application. So today, did anybody practice that concept? JDBC authentication yesterday? The as it is code is also working. No changes are there. Fine. Any questions, anyone? Tomorrow we are going to learn OAuth. Yeah. Online students, any questions, anyone?
No, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, why we are taking at the rate of to add on the
Sir, here, so the question is asking a question. Why are you not using @bean annotation here? When do we go for @bean? If you want to create the object and if you want to represent that object as a Spring Bean, we are going for @bean. Here, we are not creating the object for the builder. The object is already created by the Spring Security. I'm just modifying the existing object. Okay, so that is the reason we are not using @bean. If I use @bean annotation, what is the meaning of that? I need to return that, I need to create that bean and I need to return that bean. When you use @bean, we are getting an exception. You can't use a void return type for the bean method. So what is the meaning? I need to return the object. So what object I need to return? I need to create one object and I need to return that object. But authentication manager builder, object already created by the Spring Security, you no need to create once again. So I just want to use that builder in configuration. So that's why we are using @auto void. That means dependency injection we are doing, not the bean creation we are doing here. That is the meaning. Got it?
yes,
Here
sir.
we are creating the object for the security filter chain. We are returning that object and we are building that object here. That's why we are using @bean here. But here we are not creating any object. We are using the existing object. For that existing object, we are setting some data. That's it. So when I use auto void, what is the meaning of that? IOC container will call this method by passing this Spring Bean object. Already this builder is a Spring Bean object. So it is like kind of a setter injection, guys. So what we will do in the setter injection, we will write a method by taking one object as a parameter. IOC container is performing the setter injection here. This is already a Spring Bean. We are getting as a parameter for the method that for that object we are setting some data. What type of authentication it has to perform, which data source it has to use, which queries it has to use. We are giving that data. We are not creating the bean. We are taking the bean and we are modifying that bean. That's it. That is the reason here auto void is available. Here @bean is available. @bean means you create the object, you return the object. Auto wiring means you take the object which is already created for your method. You got the
Sir,
clarity?
where
Good morning.
sir, where you
Hello.
wrote right form.login in filter chain,
Sorry?
there one more option is there in filter chain, right?
Yeah.
Form login, that option is there, right?
Yes.
There, if you put dot, right, one option is there, authentication manager also we can pass it. Before that, no, before form login, not after. Uh, yeah, that parenthesis, yeah, yeah. Here, if you authentication manager, we can pass. I think
Yeah,
here
if you,
bean creation,
whatever this object we are getting, right, you can pass that
I think
authentication
we
manager
can
here
pass.
also.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Yeah, you can
So
do
in
that.
that way, I think bean, I think we can pass instead of
Huh.
auto add.
You can do that.
Hi, sir. Good morning.
Yes, sir.
If I use my own encryption decryption
Sorry?
process, how we can do it? If I use my own encryption decryption, here using new bcrypt password encoder, right?
Right.
If I
If
use my
you,
own
if you want to use your own encryption decryption, there is a concept called user detail service concept is available, sir. This, I will explain this example with our own encryption decryption.
Okay, Ashok. Thank you.
Okay.
Sir, while getting the user, it is big, it is big, decrypting the
Yes, sir. No,
password, right?
no.
But we
Here,
are
sir, listen.
while we are
Listen. Here there is no concept of decryption. Only encryption concept is available. In the database, the password is already encrypted. Your password also will be encrypted. Then it will compare. It is not decrypting and comparing with your original password. There is no decryption concept. Only encryption concept is available. In the database, it is already encrypted. You are giving original password. Your password also it will encrypt and it will compare with the database password.
In the real time also, they will insert like that, sir. Encrypted password only.
Sorry, can you come again?
In the real time also, encrypted password they
Encrypted
will
password
insert.
will be available. Yes, sir.
They manually inserted, sir. That one.
Yeah, manually inserted from application also we can insert. We'll do an example with registration and login.
Okay, sir.
Sir, LDAP authentication, where it fits.
Sir, LDAP means in the company, LDAP server, all the single sign-on concept will be used with the LDAP, sir. Single sign-on concept with the LDAP. Okay, good.
Sir, if the user is registering, he will not give the encrypted password, right? But
Sir,
while
I
he
have
is
not explained registration process, right? We will do one example, Spring Security with registration plus login. So next example, we will work on that.
okay, it will be separate.
Yeah, right. Guys, here we have only login functionality. We don't have any registration functionality. We will do an example, user registration and user login. When user registered, he will give normal password. When we are inserting in the database, what we need to do? We need to encrypt and we need to insert that record into table. Or else tomorrow we will do that. User registration and login with the help of data JPA, we can do that. Today we use it just normal JDBC, right? So tomorrow what we can do is Spring Security with data JPA, user registration and user login. When user register, take his name, email ID, password, store in the database by encrypting the password. Then implement user login also. For that, we will go for Spring Data JPA concept. First, we will see that. Then we can go for OAuth authentication. Okay. So today, you can also do some research on this part. Spring Security with user registration and user login. So implement one REST API using registration and login functionality with the help of Spring Security. When user register, you need to store the data in the database by encrypting the password. When user login, authentication should happen by using Spring Security. So tomorrow we will work on this example. Then you will get the clarity how the data will be inserted in the database, how authentication and authorization will happen in our application. Okay, so you can work on this example for today as a research. Tomorrow we will do this example in the class. Once it is completed, then we will go for OAuth security. Good. Fine, guys. Thank you.
Sir,
This I'm stopping
one
for
question,
today.
sir.
We'll
Sir,
meet in the tomorrow session. Yeah.
Sir, one question, sir. I mean, LDAP is used only for SSO. Only for
Generally, sir,
SSO.
LDAP means the server which will maintain all the details at one place. So
Yeah.
when you want to implement security, logins for multiple applications, if you go for company, so in the company, multiple softwares you can access only with your employee ID. So that's where LDAP comes into picture.
Okay.
Single sign-on.
Okay, single sign. I mean, we can also use for single person as well, right? I mean,
Yeah, you can do that. You can do that.
okay, thanks.
Sir, and where does Kerberos come into picture?
Sorry,
Kerberos.
I have not heard that, sir.
Okay.
Yeah. Fine, guys. Thank you. With this, I'm stopping. We'll meet in the tomorrow session.